Do you know, I always feel a little pang of guilt when it comes to making these videos because John Lennox, he seems such a kindly chap. I almost feel a little bit mean making these videos. I think he's the kind of chap we'd all like to have as an uncle. I think you'd probably get quite good presents off him at Christmas and at birthdays if he was your uncle. But nevertheless, here we are again, once again for me to make one of my dissections of Mr. John Lennox. Obviously not a literal dissection of Mr. John Lennox. He's still alive. That would be immoral even for an atheist to do that, I think. But a dissection of his arguments. This is part of a series that I've been making. I'll invite you to look at the previous parts. They're in the footnotes. Every single one of them different. Every single one of them slightly eccentric in one way, shape or form. But I'm working my way through a series of questions that he tackled aimed at atheists. So let's get on with this part, shall we? Let's have a little slice of John Lennox.
The question of the central Christian claim that Jesus is God become human is, of course, a fascinating one for any scientist, and very frequently people react with a certain amount of incredulity when they discover I believe this, and they say, how could you possibly believe in the 21st century as a scientist that Jesus was God? It's all very well talking about the fine-tuning argument and evidence that there's an intelligence behind the universe, but come off it. This is going way beyond to assert that the God who designed the universe and who upholds it actually became human. Can you explain it? And I grinned and said, yes, but I want to ask you a question first. He said, that's fine. I said, my question's much simpler. It's this: what is consciousness? Oh, he said, we don't really know what consciousness is. Well, I said, okay, let's try something simpler and something that comes nearer to the realm of physics. What is energy? And he said, yes, well, energy is something we know a lot about. We can measure it, we can use it, and so on. We can convert it into different forms. I said, but that's not my question. My question is, what is it? And he said, well, we don't really know. And I said, it's good to hear that, because at least it shows you agree with the Nobel Prize winner for physics, Richard Feynman, who said, nobody knows what energy is. But it helps us into the whole question, because the reason you believe in consciousness and energy, even though you cannot understand very much about what they actually are, is because of their explanatory power. They make sense of various things that you observe. And I said it's exactly the same, of course, at a deeper or perhaps a higher level, with my faith that Jesus is both God and man. It's the only solution that makes sense. That he is a man is not difficult, of course, but it's that he is both God and man. And I believe that that makes sense of the evidence of his life, the uniqueness of his claim, which he backed up by showing that he possessed the attributes of God. And above all, I suppose the central thing that I find convincing is the fact that he rose from the dead. He's broken the death barrier.
So as with most of John Lennox's answers, I found it interesting, and I found that it brought up as many questions that is actually answered. I think there were three particular things that I wanted to touch upon here. The first was that I found his equivalence a little bit weak, it has to be said, between believing that Jesus was the Son of God and finding some kind of equivalence with that, and with a physicist looking at ideas, concepts such as energy and consciousness. In terms of what energy is, I always regarded it more as a kind of method of accounting for the relationships between different phenomena in physics, rather than something that is tangible in and of itself. But I think the important thing is, why do we use a concept such as energy, and how does that differ from belief that Jesus was the Son of God? And in fact, John Lennox provides his own answer there. We use the idea of energy because it works for us as a concept. It makes the maths work within physics and allows us to do things, and it seems to work on a day-by-day basis, and that is why we use it. We don't accept the concept of energy because a few people 2,000 years ago wrote about it and said that they accepted it as a concept. I think that if that was all we had to go on, then scientists might regard energy in a slightly different light than the light that they do regard it in. He simply cannot present the same kind of case for Jesus as the Son of God as a scientist can for accepting energy as a valid concept within which you can create a framework to do the kinds of equations that scientists like to perform, that scientists need to perform. The second thing, moving on a bit from that, let's put that to one side and just consider the actual claims that John Lennox is propping up here with regard to Jesus as the Son of God. And what John Lennox talks about is that he sees this as the best kind of explanation. And what is it that he's trying to explain? He's a little bit vague about all of it. But one thing that it's clear is he's trying to explain things such as the eyewitness evidence of miracles and of the life of Jesus. How could these things have possibly happened? These things that are claimed, such as having risen from the dead, feeding people with a limited amount of food, bread and fishes, walking on water, healing the lame, all this kind of shite, right? How could that happen? We have eyewitness accounts for it. And he finds the best explanation is that it's all true and that Jesus was the Son of God, right? That's the most reasonable, I think, explanation I can have for what it is that he says that this is the best explanation for. Frankly, what I'd have to say is, if that is the case, then why does John Lennox not accept similar accounts for other people, such as the Indian guru Sathya Sai Baba, who only died 6 years ago? This isn't 2,000 years ago. This is in the modern era. Right, this guy, this Indian guru, the interesting thing with Satya Sai Baba is not that he was performing miracles, it is the amount of evidence that we have, eyewitness evidence, eyewitness accounts that we have of people claiming that he performed an entire diverse array of miracles on a regular basis. I will link you to a couple of very interesting pages on that, which includes a huge number. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of eyewitness accounts of people who claim to have either experienced themselves, they've actually directly seen this guy perform miracles, or one of their relatives swears blind that they have seen Satya Sai Baba either perform a miracle or has performed a miracle upon their very person. Okay, now, does John Lennox view Satya Sai Baba in the same light? Does he say, well, the most logical explanation then is that these people are right and that Satya Sai Baba is a god, because that's what these people believe, that Satya Sai Baba is a god or is an avatar for a Hindu god in some cases. Now, I know John Lennox does not believe that because that would be incompatible with his Roman Catholicism, right? But if you can have all these accounts in the present day made by people who are still alive and he isn't convinced by them, why is he convinced by a small number of accounts that aren't even made second-hand, that perhaps aren't even made third-hand, that are in four different Gospels, that aren't even written by the names that are attributed to them, that happened 2,000 years ago? That really doesn't make any sense. But all of this, I think, pales into insignificance when we take into account the bigger picture. And what is the bigger picture? Well, it's looking beyond just the claims that were made of Jesus in his life, but the whole function of Jesus and what it's all about. Okay, so what is the bigger picture? Okay. So the starting point then is that we are all born inherently sinful. We're born into sin. It's this whole concept, it's a kind of ancestral sin that stems from the original sin that Adam committed in the Garden of Eden, which is why it's called original sin, and we're all born with this sinful nature, and that creates something of a problem for God, because God, recall, is omniscient. He can do whatever the fuck he likes, for crying out loud. But the one thing that he can't do, even though he can do whatever he likes, the one thing that he can't do, on top of all the other things that he can't do, which is anything that is incompatible with the maximally benevolent thing in any given circumstance. But the one thing, other than all those other infinite number of things that he can't do, is that he can't be around sin. He just can't, and just the tiniest amount of sin, right? It doesn't matter whether you've wiped out 1 million people or just had a little bit of a wank in your bedroom, any of it. That's just too much. Right, and so what it means is that he doesn't have a choice. He has to send you to a not so good place. Okay. Because he can't be around sin. So once you've died, it's bad news. But it seems that in a moment of, I suppose you could call it moral lucidity, okay, he got a few little ethical pangs of guilt there, and he thought, maybe this isn't right here. I'm not just condemning people for the things that they've done, but I'm condemning them for the things that not just their father did, or their father's father, or their father's 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 father, but going all the way back to this Adam guy. And because he did something wrong, because he committed this scrumping offence on my favourite tree, right, that forevermore I'm holding everybody to account for it. And so he thought, you know what, let's solve this, right? Let's give people another chance. And so what did he do? What didn't he do? I'll tell you what he didn't do is he just said, okay, I'll tell you what, right, let's enough water under the old bridge. Let's just draw a line under the whole thing. I'll stop you being born with a sinful nature. Okay, that's what he didn't do. Something else he didn't do is he didn't just say, I tell you what, just ask me for salvation and that'll do. I'll tell you something else he didn't do. He didn't just say, I tell you what, I want a quick sorry, gotta give me a quick sorry, that will, just say sorry, that will do. No. What did he do? What he did is something which, according to John Lennox, is the most sensible thing. It's the thing that makes the most sense, is that he sent his son down, who's also himself, right? It must be really fucking difficult to know who gives a card to who come birthday time, right? But he sent his son down to earth, knowing, because he's omniscient, that we would kill his son, and that would thereby provide a mechanism by which he could forgive us for our sinful nature. Because that really makes sense, doesn't it? That would really make sense. You'd really think that I was acting rationally if my neighbour scrumped some fruit off my plum tree, right? And I was a bit pissed off with my neighbour, damn right, because he's stolen some of my fruit, right? He should know better than that. But after a period of time goes by, I think, do you know what? Let's not make more out of this than we need to. Let's not make a mountain out of a molehill. I want to forgive my neighbour. But instead of just forgiving my neighbour or giving my neighbour the chance to apologise, I say to my neighbour, no. What you need to do first is you need to kill my son. You kill my son, and then maybe we can talk. Maybe then I will accept your apology. You'd think I was a fucking madman if I was to do that. It doesn't seem to make any sense, does it? But none of this so far is the real, really just totally fucked up bit. That is still to come, and that is the point, that all of this is taking place because of this original sin which results as a result of the original sin committed by Adam in the Garden of Eden. The sin committed by Adam in the Garden of Eden that John Lennox doesn't even believe took place. This is the absurd bit about it. He doesn't believe this was an actual event. So let's see if we can put this all together. Let's encapsulate this, shall we? And see if this makes sense. This best possible explanation according to John Lennox. So God had a son who's also himself. And what he did is he sent his son down to us so that we would kill his son, thereby providing a pathway for our atonement for the inherent sin which we are born with as a result of an act which never took place to begin with, which never actually even took place. I find that amazing, but what I find even more amazing is that John Lennox regards this as the best possible explanation. I've got to ask, you've got to be asking the same thing, right? What other explanations must John Lennox have been considering alongside it for this to have been the best of them? I mean, I have to say, even if it turned out to be right, I would still say John Lennox has no business believing this and suggesting it's the best available explanation. Even if God was to appear to all of us and say, do you know what, here I am, finally revealing myself, and yeah, the whole business with Jesus, he was my son, and yeah, I did actually send him down there knowing that you would kill him so that I could forgive you for an offence that never actually happened in the first place, right? Even if it turned out to be true, I'd still say that John Lennox has no business suggesting that that is the best explanation when there are far, far more mundane explanations that make 1,000 times more sense than that makes. Okay, that's pretty much all that I wanted to say on that. Until the next episode, where I look into John Lennox's wonderful, wonderful answers to atheists. Thank you for watching. You know the rest.